6 days ago, the United States and Israel said this would be quick, targeted, precise, contained. It is none of those things. Today is day 6 of the war on Iran. The death toll has crossed 1,000. A US submarine has sunk an Iranian warship not in the Gulf, not in the Red Sea, but in the Indian Ocean, off the coast of Sri Lanka, 2,000 miles from Iran's shores. And the White House? The White House is calling this the early days. I am Nisha P.S. and let's get started. Let's begin with numbers, because sometimes that's the only language that cuts through. Iran's Red Crescent has recorded 1,332 strikes across 636 locations inside Iran. Not military bases alone, not just Tehran. The strikes were carried out across 174 cities in the entire country. In hospitals, schools, residential areas, the Tehran Grand Bazaar, the historic Golistan Palace. Iran's foreign ministry says 33 civilian sites have been hit. And when the White House was asked yesterday about the girls' school that was struck and killed at least 168 children, the US press secretary said the US does not target civilians. Since Saturday, more than 1,100 civilians have been killed in Iran. And in Lebanon, which did not even ask to be a part of this war, over 83,000 people have been displaced. Civilians are sleeping on highways, on pavements, wherever they can find shelter. And then there is this number, perhaps the most telling one of all. A Reuters poll asked Americans whether they support these attacks. Only 25% said yes. 43% said no. 3/4 of the American public does not support this war. And yet, this week, the Senate voted to let it continue. Overnight, Israel launched its 11th wave of strikes on Tehran. US and Western officials now say Iran has lost their air supremacy over its own skies. That means Iran cannot defend the air above its own capital. Meanwhile, Tehran is emptying out. The UN Refugee Agency says between 1,000 and 2,000 vehicles are leaving the city every day. Next comes an important question. Who leads Iran now? Iran's clerical establishment is now trying to pick a new supreme leader. Ayatollah Khamenei was killed on the very first day of this war. His son, Mojtaba Khamenei, has emerged as the front runner. Israel has already made its position very clear. Whoever takes that job becomes an unequivocal target for elimination. So Iran is choosing a leader who will be hunted the moment they are announced. Ask yourself, what kind of person says yes to that? On Wednesday, a United States submarine fired a torpedo and sank the Iranian frigate, the IRIS Dana, in the Indian Ocean off the southern coast of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's Navy recovered 87 bodies and rescued 32 people. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araqchi responded, and he added a detail that I think has not received nearly enough attention. He said the Dana was, quote, a guest of India's Navy. The ship had been on a port visit to India. It was struck without warning in international waters 2,000 miles from Iran's shores. Araqchi said, and I'm going to quote him directly, the United States will come to bitterly regret the precedent it has set. Let's come to the Strait of Hormuz part of the story. Iran has closed it and claims complete control of the waterway. And Trump says the US Navy is ready to escort tankers through the strait. When two parties make contradictory claims about who controls the same water, someone is going to have to prove it, and that confrontation may also be coming. Yet, to be on the safer side, Denmark's Maersk, Germany's Hapag-Lloyd, China's COSCO, all three have suspended Gulf bookings until further notice. Let me remind you that these are among the world's top 5 container shipping giants. Here is something that should be making more headlines. An Iranian ballistic missile in Turkish airspace, flying through Iraq, through Syria, into Turkey. NATO air defenses shot it down. A Turkish official told reporters the missile had been aimed at a base in Greek Cyprus but veered off course. This is the first time NATO forces have intercepted an Iranian missile heading toward a member state since this conflict began. Once Iranian projectiles start landing near NATO territory, Article 5 conversations become very real, very fast. Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty commits member states to collective defense, treating an armed attack against one ally as an attack against them all. Let me tell you where the world stands tonight, starting with the United States. There is a law in America called the War Powers Act. It says that if a president wants to keep fighting a war, he needs Congress to approve it. This week, a group of senators, both Democrats and Republicans, tried to invoke that law. They put forward a resolution that would have forced US President Trump to come to Congress and get formal approval to continue this war. The Senate voted on it yesterday, 53 to 47. The resolution was killed. Republicans voted it down. What that means is, in plain language, the United States is now fighting a war in the Middle East with no congressional oversight, with no formal approval and no expiry date. One man decides, one man continues, and the legislature has just said, not a problem. Remember, only 25% of Americans support this war, and yet their elected representatives just handed the president a blank check to keep fighting it. Also, on the intervening night of March 3 and 4, the US test-fired the lethal nuclear-capable Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile. This is also called the Doomsday Missile. Moving on, China. Foreign Minister Wang Yi called for an immediate ceasefire. Beijing is sending a special envoy to mediate. Spain. Madrid flatly rejected US claims that it had agreed to allow its bases to be used for this war. Trump threatened to cut off all trade with Spain. A diplomatic tussle is brewing between Washington and Madrid. Canada. Prime Minister Mark Carney is in Australia and he could not, quote, rule out participation. Australia and New Zealand both have deployed military aircraft to the Middle East for evacuation contingencies. Australia has 1,15,000 citizens in this region. So where does this leave us? 6 days in, over 1,000 civilians dead in Iran alone. A warship sank in the Indian Ocean. A missile intercepted over Turkey. Global shipping grinding to a halt. The Strait of Hormuz closed. Kurdish ground forces mobilizing on Iran's borders. What began as a 48-hour campaign is now still in its early days as per the White House. Early days of what? A regional war? A global one? And who exactly decides when it ends? These are not just rhetorical questions. These are the only questions that matter right now.